Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever it might be. My name is Sean, and I'm delighted you're joining us for today's ESBC community webinar. Today I'm joined by Richard Harbridge, MVP, who will cover AI for team leaders, empowering teams with Microsoft 365 and Copilot. We love hearing what you guys have to say, so remember to join in on the conversation about today's webinar. Our handle is at ESBC_community, and our hashtag is hashtag ESBC25. Tweet us, tag us, and tell us what you learned. Don't forget to check out our Learning Hub, which is updated with the latest blogs, ebooks, webinars, and how-to videos. You can access and view the Learning Hub by visiting our website, sharepointeurope.com, and clicking the Content tab at the top. Don't let the learning stop here. Continue to keep up and stay ahead by joining us for our next webinar, Understanding Data Security Essentials for Dataverse, Fabric, and Copilot Studio, with Tatu Sapala, MVP, and Claire Edson. This webinar will take place Wednesday, 9th of April at 11 a.m. CEST. For more information on this webinar, please check out www.sharepointeurope.com/register for webinars. Take your Power Platform expertise to new heights at EPBC 25. Join a full-day workshop and master everything from Power Automate to AI agents and Microsoft Copilot. You'll learn from top industry professionals and connect with peers who share your passion for innovation. Use code Copilot Week to save €150. But hurry, the offer is only valid until April 30th. Scan the QR code to find out more. At Falcon Europe, you can learn about Power BI, Synapse, Data Factory, Azure, Microsoft Fabric, and more. Book your super early bird sale today and save up to €700. Book now at www.sharepointeurope.com/European Microsoft Fabric Community Conference tickets. Attend Europe's premier Microsoft 365 and AI conference for incredible insights and real-world inspiration. Book today and take advantage of our super early bird sale. Use the code Copilot Week to save €150 on your ticket. This offer is only valid until April 30th. Scan the QR code to find out more and secure your place. As always, if you have any questions at any stage, please feel free to type them in the questions box, and Richard will get to them during the webinar. This webinar will be recorded and added to the Resource Center, where you'll be notified by email when it's available. And now I'm going to pass you over to today's webinar presenter, Richard. Hello, Richard. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi, everyone. And I'll take a screen share in a second. All right. Well, thanks, everyone, for coming and joining the webinar. Really excited to share with all of you today. So it should be coming through okay in my little canary in the coal mine. Perfect. Excellent. So today we're going to be talking about AI for team leaders. Now, this is a subject that I'm very passionate about, and I'm finding it has a lot of value. And in this session, I'm going to talk through a few areas. One, why this matters. And then we're going to talk a little bit about, what we can do as a team leader. And then lastly, what we can do for our teams. And that's kind of the breakdown of the flow today. Just a little bit of background for those who haven't seen me speak before. I'm really, really friendly. So if you have questions or if you want to have a conversation, a lot of times with sessions like this, I can't be as prescriptive as I'd like to be. And a one-on-one discussion can be really powerful. So please don't hesitate to reach out. I'd love to have a chat with you after. In the Q&A, please share your questions. So I'll be sure to review them if I don't get to them all. During the session, I'll definitely be looking through them as a follow-up, because I do think this is the most important topic area when it comes to success, which I'll explain in a moment when it comes to AI. So with that, let me dive right in. Again, super friendly. Please reach out if there's a way that I can help you. And I'm really easy to get hold of on LinkedIn. It's probably the easiest way if you don't have my email address, which is richard@2lead.com, or you can always hit me up on LinkedIn. All right. So why does AI matter for team leaders? Why are we in a session about team leadership and AI? Well, it turns out that when people are learning this newer framing of AI, what's actually happening is we're relearning. And this is a big change. What you had is, for a long time, we would have a long period where you learn a bunch of skills and you get some value out of those skills. Maybe 10 years ago, you might learn a bunch of skills, and let's say in the technology space, you could use those skills for maybe 7 or 8 years. You'd get a long wind or tail out of a year or two of learning. And now what's happened is that time period, the duration of our skills value, it keeps decreasing. And this is partly because of AI, but it's also because it's just the pace of change that's been happening in our industry. And so what happens is, a lot of what AI is it's just relearning. a lot of what we're doing is we're taking how we've been working before and we're learning new ways of doing it. We call these the aha moments. So when a user is using AI, especially in the first time, what they'll do is they'll go through their own personal journey. Why should I care? Then they'll figure out, oh, how will I use it? Oh, I'll use it this way. Then I'll figure out when can I use it? And I'll kind of go through this iteration, and eventually I'll start to use that, and it'll change my behavior. It'll change my digital pattern. And what we want to focus on here is not the individual story, although that's really important. It's how that changes across a team. So in groups of users, what we find is that the how will we use it becomes really, really valuable as a discussion point. And this is because many organizations have had some success with rolling out these technologies, right? A lot of people have increased productivity, they're getting benefits from using AI tools, but what they're struggling with is they haven't quite figured out how to do that across teams, across departments, across cross-functional groups. And that's a really important distinction because that's where there's actually a lot more value from AI over time. One way to think about this is that when we learn any technology, especially something like AI that has, resistance, there's concerns around it, there's a variety of reasons that this is more complicated than most technologies. When you learn from that, you actually learn from coworkers. That's non-manager, non-IT people. And this is really important that the most effective, the most useful, and also the most frequent usage of learning is through coworkers. And when we think about it that way, it makes sense that the more we saturate teams with Copilot, the more we saturate teams with these AI tools, the more they're able to advance and adapt. And importantly, while self-service and of course formal and informal training is useful, again, we cannot underestimate the value of this top right quadrant and what we're doing there. And so what we're going to talk about today is one way of doing this and getting this at a good scale is to do this through teams instead of through individuals. Now, again, taking this a step back, if we look at the industry data, we can see a lot of different industry stats that can help us understand what's really going on. When you look at the way in which people adopt these technologies, overwhelmingly the encouragement to use AI in the flow of work and scale. So we're not talking about like 50-person pilots, right? But in organizations that are using AI at scale, it's overwhelmingly coming from managers. So managers are essentially supporting teams and they're helping teams understand when and how to use these AI tools. And they're helping teams not just learn when and how to use them, but resolving team member challenges using AI. So managers have become really, really key instruments within a rollout of AI. And when I say team leaders, I do mean a mixture of people. There's the role authority of a manager, but then there's also the relational authority of a team leader. And in both instances, they're both responsible. So while the data is cleaner for managers because of tiering and hierarchies based on customer data, especially with Viva Insights or Copilot Analytics now, the reality is we can see that this is true for teams in general. Teams are how people adapt, and that's where team leaders or managers are really driving that adoption and usage of AI within the workforce. Now, this is actually really interesting because it's much more prevalent in managers, and managers other than your own are more prevalent than either peers, C-suite leadership, developer of AI tools like Microsoft themselves, generic communications, and much more. Again, this is a really important layer that we need to get right when we think about deploying. And there's a lot of organizations that do a good job of planning out their C-suite. How do we understand this AI thing? What are our stakeholders and how do we manage them? And many do a pretty good job on communication. Like, hey, we've got a drip-fed campaign and we're going to teach people and we'll have this onboarding, like an ongoing onboarding for AI. And that's great. But again, if you skip or don't prioritize managers and team leaders, then I think you're going to see less effective results. All right, so what do we have for real data? One of the early state reports that we have right now is from the cybernetic teammate exercise. And basically what they did is they evaluated against teams without AI, which makes sense, and teams with AI. And interestingly, when an individual uses AI, their performance tends to be as effective as a team. And this makes a lot of sense actually, because this kind of suggests to us that the people who have the power of AI are kind of more capable than themselves on their own, right? This is good for everyone who ever believed in teamwork, the value of teamwork, we see that. And there is an impact. When you use AI, there's a reduction in total demand for teamwork because there's some things that are, and I'll talk about in a second, that are called low value collaboration or transactional, where one person is asking someone else for something, and instead of it being a complementary thing where we're both building off of each other, it becomes more transactional where one person's getting the value and the other person's not. In a simpler way of framing this, I might as well skip ahead in this. If you think about this, 1 + 1 = 3. A lot of times within organizations, if you were to take my time and I had an hour, you take your time and you have an hour, and we work together on something, we can produce on average something more effective than if I had 2 hours or you had 2 hours. And that's because you bring your skills, your knowledge, your expertise, and I bring my skills, my knowledge, my expertise, and together, that's the 1 + 1 = 3. It's, more than the sum of our parts. And when we think of that's collaboration, the reason we don't collaborate on everything is because there's a cost, right? If you have many people, well, all of a sudden it's not them bringing all of their skills and expertise, it's just them bringing a small subset because they're not speaking for part of that collaboration event in that meeting, let's say. And so we see that there's a reduction in total value over time. Another reason for this is you're interrupting someone. So for us to have a meeting, I need to pull you out of whatever it is you're doing. So, focus time and all those things. So there's all these costs. And what we find is that when you use AI, what you're really getting is 1 times AI. So you use AI in your ways, I use AI in my ways, which gives us skills and knowledge, because that's what AI does, is it gives us skills and knowledge. And then we put that together and we get a multiplicative effect greater than in this previous example of 3, we're going to get a more substantial impact. So collaboration is elevated and the value of collaboration is elevated, but more importantly, there are times when we don't need to collaborate, where really I'm saying, hey, I'd love you to help me find a document in SharePoint because you're really good at finding SharePoint documents. And so in that case, it's transactional. I'm not bringing my skills and knowledge. I'm really taking advantage of your skills and knowledge. And there's a lot of these collaboration events, meetings, emails, all sorts of correspondence like this that has that lower value transactional style collaboration. And a lot of that gets offset over time by AI. So what I'm saying with this data point is that there is a strong value in using AI, but in early evidence, we're seeing that teams that use AI can get even more substantial benefit than individuals with AI. And again, this tends to come up in scenarios where it's not about transactional, but it's about higher value. So think of those higher value collaboration events where you're building a solution or you're trying to get higher quality and you're trying to take it to the next level. In those scenarios, that's where you get a lot more value from working with team members. And this isn't just in that previous example where you saw it kind of similar, but again, in those top 10%, those top 10 quality solutions that you might be working on, that's where the team plus AI really drives a notable impact. And that's where even today, teams without AI can be more performant than individuals with AI. And so again, this is strong indicators of a significant difference of impact there. And I'm hoping this makes a lot of sense for you guys. One last comment here. When you think about this in a different way, we also know that teams have this dynamic where people work with one another. And when you have people working together, it can be hard to make sure that people feel good, right? That there's a positive outcome from those interactions. And what we know is that using AI actually does have a net positive impact on emotions. So people find that it allows them to get this, unbiased thing that can answer questions and review things and give them feedback and all sorts of things. So there's lots of benefits there. And we see a notable increase in significant positive emotional benefit at the team level. So when a team uses AI, they get even more of a benefit. And that makes a lot of sense. Again, if you really think through the experience of it, people are using AI and kind of bouncing off each other and getting that benefit. So these are some data points that really, I think, suggest strongly that what I'm saying is true, that we know that teams aren't just at the core of AI success, but they're a key part of unlocking that value. Now, I've already talked about 1 + 1 = 3, so I'll skip over these slides, but again, think of a simple sequence like brainstorming. In this brainstorming exercise, you have one person that's generating ideas, inexpensive ways to increase reach without social media for a website. So this person's generating ideas, and then the other people are saying, oh, these are great ideas. They're taking a few of them. Maybe one person continues to generate new ideas. Another 2 people are picking the best ideas and kind of sorting through them, rationalizing them and prioritizing them. And maybe the 4th person is actually taking the best ideas and is actually using AI to start to work breakdowns for those ideas. The point is, in a collaboration sequence today, when you use AI and each individual uses AI, we're getting this multiplicative effect of value. And that's really important. Not only that, but we learn from each other. How are you using AI? Oh, that's interesting. Let me think about how I might use AI myself. One last comment on this, on the low value collaboration reduction. It's tricky because we, of course, have sets of employees that are not using AI, and we have other sets of employees that are using AI. So one of the things I will say is that it does take time. Microsoft has a pretty well-regarded tipping point, they describe it as, of 11 weeks. And after 11 weeks or so, people have been using AI for a while, they'll get used to it, and you should start to see some of the real impact from AI. One of the things that we look at with a lot of customers is we look at things like how are meetings affected as people use AI over time. And in that regard, the worst problem with meetings, as we mentioned before, is inefficiency, lacking clear goals, too many meetings. And I'll tell you that the vast majority of customers, when they use AI, especially when they lead with teams in their usage of AI, they see a reduction in the total number of transactional meetings, which makes people's meeting satisfaction go way up. So qualitative studies, when you ask people with surveys, how do you feel about meetings now? Those who are working with other people who use AI, they're saying it's way better because there's way less meetings. And then the meetings that they do have, they tend to be more valuable, including the follow-up, there's the pre-meeting, there's the during meeting, and then there's the after meeting. Or if you think of a collaboration event, there's that sequencing, and they find a lot of value in that. So these are things that you yourself can look at when you look at your own data and rollout. All right, so lots of value around collaboration with AI, and teams and team leadership is going to be at the center of your AI deployment. One other reason to think about this is that a lot of organizations, when they allocate people and they license them for things like Copilot, what they find is that they choose like traditional models. So you have a bunch of champions. You say, okay, I'll give these people, the access to Copilot. And when you do that, that can work. But the problem with that is we want a model where at a organizational level, we say, guiding principle, AI is a competitive advantage, and we want all employees to have equal access to AI. Today, we're going to give it to those who need it most first, and we're going to do that. But again, our goal is to get that to everyone. Well, if you have a process where you are nominating stakeholders through traditional methods, where you're taking champions and giving them licenses, that's not going to be as good as if you have a open nomination process, which I encourage every organization to do. And it's basically 3 or more people. If I have 3 or more people, and I believe we could use AI, whether it's Copilot or some other AI tool, I should have the ability to nominate and request it. And by doing this, it makes it easier for us to deploy, right? When we license those people, we're saturating a group of shared people that are working together, which has a lot of knock-on effects. Another reason it's great is it's easier for surveys and getting responses like, how's it going? How's this working? It's much easier for agents and automation opportunities because these people are shared. They all have a shared circle of trust. They all work on similar things. They're already collaborating frequently. So when one person has an issue and you work to automate that, often you can actually drive a lot faster. SharePoint agents, the various agents and automation opportunities can be driven much faster through these teams. So teams are at the center of successful Copilot deployments, and they're better than an individual approach. And what we find is that there's a 3x difference. Like if you were to go with an individual-based nomination process, and we're talking about a really good one, right, where you're carefully looking at like, hey, these are the people that are using these technologies already. They're ready for AI. We've got qualitative data and quantitative data for it. Even when you do that, you're going to get a 3x return on investment from adoption investments if you instead use a team-based model, team-based nomination, team-based allocation and rollout, team-based onboarding for AI, and much more. So that's at least what we're finding, and I really want to kind of land that point. Lastly, we're at the early stages of this AI journey. We have this human first experience today, then we're moving towards humans and agents, agents with humans, and then agent first with human oversight. And during that sequencing, it's the team leaders that will get you from one to the next level, to the next level, to the next level. And I have lots of anecdotal evidence for this, but we're seeing that to be the case. All right, so if that wasn't enough, the last consideration is there's a lot of resistance to AI, and understandably so. A more subtle way to represent this is that people often undervalue or underrepresent the impact or value it's having on them. So if you do these surveys and you ask people, like, how much time are you getting back from using Copilot? How's it helping you? What people generally do, statistically above average, is that they will share less, they'll reduce the total impact that it's having and representation across its impact to others. And they'll do that because there's no benefit for them sharing that it's helping them in other ways. And so this is a big deal, because when we think about team leaders, one of the things that is interesting about a team is when a team shares how AI is helping them as a team, instead of as individuals, we find that this risk of underreporting, this risk of isolation, a bunch of other things, is much less. And without getting to all the detail, what we're finding is that this team model is one of the best ways, and on all the governance and things around it, is one of the best ways to deal with, this insecurity that comes with AI today. So hopefully this also resonates with many of you. All right, so that was a bit of a long-winded way of describing the many ways that AI matters for team leaders. Now what I want to do is dive into a couple examples of using AI as a leader, and then I'll talk about using AI to improve teams. Excellent. All right. So the first thing around using AI as a leader, I want to talk about most of us as leaders. We have two types of work. We have leading and managerial work, and then we have non-leading, non-managerial work. And in that sequencing, many of us wish we had more time for the left, right? Many of us wish we had more time for leading and managerial work, strategy focused, talent, people management, that sort of thing, especially as a manager. But in fact, most of us spend so much time on admin and individual contributor work. The good news is, on the right side, admin and individual contributor work, there is so much good content out there in the marketplace around how to use AI for those workloads. On the left side, strategy and talent, people management, kind of leader, traditional stuff, it's not as robust, the amount of guidance. And so while I look to improve this over time, you could all have an impact by helping find what's working for you and sharing it, even if it's only within your team and the teams you work with. So this is really what we want to talk about today, is the left side here and how we can do this a little bit better. Now, I want to start with, I don't think there's a need to learn everything yourself. There's so much wonderful content out there. Obviously, Microsoft has a bunch, but even outside of the Microsoft ecosystem, there's so much good content out there on how to use AI effectively within any role or with any circumstance. So use that content first as a starting point, and then when it doesn't quite fit your needs, then create your own. So as an example, Microsoft has material within the Adoption Success Center. Again, this will improve in the near coming weeks. But what they have is they have examples of coaching team members, fostering team innovation, catching up on your inbox as a leader, and how, again, individual productivity scenarios, onboarding team members. So think of like, how do I improve onboarding for my department or my project or other things like that. Lots of things that AI can do in a helpful way. And one of the things I always encourage people to think about is not, how do I do what I'm doing today with AI more effectively, but how do I do something I'm not doing at all today? Many of us don't do entire activities, and AI gives us the option or an ability to do some of those. And that's a wonderful opportunity for many of us. So again, not just what we are doing and how do we do it better, but how do we do something that we're not doing at all, but we have the ability to do because AI makes it so cost effective. There's all sorts of do's and don'ts for prompting. I won't go through all these. Again, they'll be in the deck for reference. There's a whole lot of things to understand about what goes into a good prompt, how to write good prompts, how to make them successful, how to make sure that you're getting the best results back, how to continue prompting after. So there's this concept of like cyborgs and centaurs. So cyborgs are those they try and create the perfect prompt, and they'll start a new chat regularly where they revise the prompt in the hopes that it'll get them the best result. And then there's centaurs, and centaurs are basically, the half man, half horse. It's the best of both. What they'll try and do is they'll try and work with AI, and they'll go back and forth with it in a conversational style. And because of that, they have a slightly different approach. It doesn't matter which style you use. In both instances, the point is to use it and to find ways to use it both individually and then as a team. So how do I do that more effectively? And one of the things you'll find with using it is that many instances, you're going to get subpar results the first couple times you prompt. And this is very true for any new workloads. So even if you've done prompting before, for working with like emails or communication, one of the things you'll find is that when you start to use it for leading and managing, we're not used to writing these prompts. So you might have to go through a couple iterations. And this is one of the reasons I always encourage asking AI, asking Copilot, how could I improve this prompt? How can I make this more effective or successful? So don't be, a stranger to asking AI itself to help you with better prompts for this. All right. So here's an example of how you might use AI from a prompting perspective. So you could have a prompt, and you could say something like, sorry, I'm a manager, and I was recently in a meeting where I felt the discussion went off track and became tense. We've all been in meetings like that. And so I want you to analyze the responses and identify where where I might not have shown effective emotional intelligence. And so then it will give us, excuse me, it will give us a response back to help us understand how we could do that better. You could do this for any meeting, but again, we've all been in meetings that are a little bit not as great. Maybe it's not you leading the meeting, maybe it's somebody else, but I would encourage you to explore these types of use cases with AI. So when you do this, you might get a response back like this. And AI will say, okay, based on these timestamps, here's what I've seen in this meeting. There's dismissiveness, there's some no's, you're not really collaborating with the other person, you're not really working with them. And in these situations, what I'd like to suggest is here's some recommendations of how to do that better. Now, this is a safe thing for me to do. The only person who sees this conversation is myself and the AI agent. I can choose how to act on this. So maybe I use it to improve my follow-up. Maybe I use it for the next meeting to kind of go in, more thoughtful around how I reflect on my own behavior in the meeting. But most importantly, AI is allowing me to do something I couldn't have done before, something new, which is in historic times, you go from meeting to meeting to meeting. You don't have time to stop and reflect. And AI can give us the ability to reflect. And AI can not just give us the ability to reflect, but then to figure out what's the most actionable next step I could take. So in this example, when I reflect on that, there's a lot to think about. Let's say I want to take that and simplify, pages of its response and say, okay, this is great. What I want is a short, simple reminder. I'm a big fan of sticky notes. You guys like sticky notes, right? Put it on my monitor. I look at it on my monitor, and every time I'm in a meeting, I look, oh, okay, that's a thing to remember. So I ask it to give me, based on our conversation, all this wonderful insight, give me a simple sticky note response that I can put up and then I can use as a visual reminder when I'm on meetings. Am I doing better at this thing? So this is called EQ goals, right? I'm creating an EQ goal and I'm working towards it and I'm creating a sticky note reminder. So it'll help me define that. Then I can take this reminder. So this is the text, for the reminder itself, and I can use it moving forward. So next time I have a meeting, instead of saying, hey, could I have done better EQ wise? What I can instead do is say, hey, I'm really working on this particular form of EQ, seeking to understand. That's my goal. So next time I have a meeting or a chat, doesn't need to be just meetings, it could be conversational chats with team members, I could look at my own experiences across that and say, hey, here's the text, right? This is the reminder, pasted it in, and I'm saying, okay, I'm working on improving my empathy goals, and I'd like you to look at this chat history. So in this case, I'm using Copilot within a team chat, and I want to find ways to improve how I'm responding. Is there improvements that I could make? You could do this for meetings. You could do this in a variety of circumstances. So now I've codified, something that I'm working on. I found a way that AI can do this analysis for me. It can do it across multiple mediums, chat, meeting transcripts, a variety of inputs, email, correspondence. So what I can do now is I can run that at scale. I can start to automate these reviews. In fact, what I could do is once I've done this a few times, I could say to AI, okay, if you find 2 or 3 things and they seem pretty notable, I want you to let me know, alert me. Otherwise, don't even worry about it. Like if it's just a really minor thing and I'm doing generally better, then I want you to still assess this, but give me no action to follow up. And so in that example, what I could do is I could take these types of prompts, I could automate them with scheduling or something that I'll talk about in a bit called Copilot Actions. And then I could have it run against every meeting, every correspondence, every one-on-one, every retro call, every planning call. And then again, it wouldn't need to alert me every time. It would just be alerting me when there's a really obvious opportunity where I could have done better. And in this way, I can actually see over time, am I improving in my EQ as a team leader? So this is one example that's been broken down into subset of steps here, but you can kind of get a feel for how prompting with AI can lead to some really nice results. And it's achievable because, again, a lot of this is just naturally working with it, almost like a leadership coach and having it help you as a leader. All right, so there are other ways to think about this. One thing I'll highlight is when we talk about prompts, a lot of people can be overwhelmed. And so while that prompt that I just walked through seems pretty straightforward, and you could probably try it yourself, there might be ones that you're trying to figure out, well, how do I do this without interrupting the flow of my work? It's so hard cognitively to remember as I'm working, like, oh, I need to ask AI for help here. So what I would recommend for that, what I'd recommend for that is I would actually use prompts at the start of your day. So until you get until you get automation and you can schedule prompts, what which is probably tied to the rollout of Copilot actions for your tenant, what I would do is I would start with, it's the beginning of the day, it's my morning, here's some prompts I'm going to run, and just run them, run a series of prompts. And then at the end of your day, run another series of prompts. And in each of these sequences, you can find subtle changes to how you lead, to how you work. You could do things like prepare for the next day. You could do things like prepare for this day. One of the things I like to do is I like to figure out how much time do I have that's high tax, like collaboration, and how much time do I have that's kind of personal focus time. And I like to get that reminder each morning. And so I actually have Copilot analyze my day and then make suggestions if there's maybe something I could look at delegating, or if there's something I could push off if it's a really busy day. And there's lots of times where I might do this because then if I get to it, great. But so many times it's helped me out where we all are, if you're like me, you're too optimistic about how much you're going to get done in a day, and it makes a big difference. At the end of the day, it can be very valuable as well. So one of the things that I really like to look at the end of the day or even at the end of the week is I like to look at how my time has been spent. How much time was, on personal related stuff like one-on-one meetings and things like that. How much time was spent on, project-based work, sales work, other things like that. And so again, by using the categories, by using some of the wonderful tools that are built into Copilot, we can actually execute a lot of this understanding what you couldn't do with like another AI tool. So Copilot has some advantages actually here in the way it understands some of these signals and the way you can use them together. And again, schedule prompts were supposed to be in late October, so I kept this in here as a mean reminder for Microsoft. Here's another example. If you've ever had a meeting, and you all have, and you've used AI after the meeting, you can use it often to look at like, let's say, what questions were unresolved, right? Or suggest some follow-up questions for this meeting. And those are great. Like, please use those capabilities, use those techniques. But one of the things I've always really liked is to use prompts like the one below here. So after the meeting, you could say something like, okay, list different perspectives by topic. List the pros and cons in a table format and visualize these points. So why do I do this? Because in most meetings, what we actually have is we have differences of perspective. And those can be really valuable because they come up again and again and often are not resolved. So let me give an example. Every time I do a webinar, I feel like there's this loop we go through where when we're talking through webinars, we figure out like, do we do our own content or do we regurgitate Microsoft stuff? Because Microsoft has some really great content out there. Here we're on a webinar. So when you're in a webinar planning meeting, naturally the perspectives are always going to be how much do we use of Microsoft's material in the example of a Microsoft-based webinar, and how much do we create unique content? And so in a Copilot tips and tricks webinar, that would absolutely be the topical thematic discussion. Yet, again, while we may come to conclusions, make a bunch of decisions, 2 weeks go by or another month, and we bring up this discussion again and we revisit it. So what I found is over time, there's so many of these situations that occur, and it's actually by using AI to look at perspectives that are different that allows us to make a little bit more proactive action. We can take improvement beyond that particular meeting. And think of like how this might help with other meetings. There's a lot of meetings where our notes don't include stuff like this. Our notes include what was said, they include what the action items are, they include things like that. What they don't include is where there was differences of perspective or opinion. And actually the differences of perspective or opinion are one of the more important areas to really start to gather, to capture and to reflect on. And this is where being a team leader makes a big difference because team leaders care about differences of perspective. All right. Another example, as a team leader, let's say you're working in meetings, back to back, you're in lots of meetings throughout a week. It's really hard to make time to share, to write about some of the wonderful conversations you've had, to put it into like Viva Engage internally, if you're a larger organization, or to just put like little posts in like a SharePoint, page or something like that as a leader. So what you can do is you can actually use AI to help you with that as well. So one of the prompts that I've used in the past and I find very valuable is I'm always surprised at how much interesting dialogue I have, but that I don't remember. So you say, generate a series of long posts emphasizing, and this is important, a surprising and novel idea. So that's important because I want something that kind of stands out versus just like a generic conversation that I've had. With a focus on challenging commonly understood patterns and expectations. So the post is coming from meetings I've had. So throughout this week, I've had emails and meetings, and I want AI and Copilot in this example to look through all those meetings and emails and to pull out, to extract some powerful, novel ideas or interesting dialogues that I've had that could make for good posts. And believe it or not, in many weeks, I find I'm very surprised at what this pulls out of my meetings. So as an example, I was meeting with this is the person who leads accessibility for Microsoft. And when we were talking through accessibility scenarios, there was a lot of really fun back and forth dialogue. It was really about a campaign and some material we were working on together. But because we were talking about all these other ideas, there's some really interesting in the transcript, some interesting dialogue and discussion there. And so I didn't have to write the post. I actually had AI write it for me, extract the information from it, and then I posted it. In this case, I put it on LinkedIn. But the point is it took content from real dialogue, conversations and things that you're having, found a way to quickly clean it up to what really is unique about it or novel or interesting, and then allowed me to easily share that. And this is a great way to acknowledge and recognize those we work with, right? A lot of times we don't do a good job of that. And it's also really powerful because as leaders, we really struggle to publish and share. And so this is a great way to potentially do that. Why is this valuable? Because you can imagine if you start to use it in this way, you might use it in other ways. What about lessons learned from projects? Well, what if you could extract from retros some of those insights? What if before the retro, you're actually able to extract from meetings throughout the week what you think are some differences of perspective or some potential learnings, and you could share those in the beginning of the retro so you guys could reflect and talk about it and so on and so forth. The point is by using a simple technique like this, it gets us familiar with using it as a leader, and then we can always find new ways of using a similar tactic across our work. Here's one last example for myself individually. So one of the things that I've struggled with is I'll use I and I'll use me a lot instead of we or us. And so something I've been working on for about a year and a half now with Copilot is actually having it look at all my correspondence, typically a weekly review, where it looks at my meetings, my correspondence, and looks for scenarios where I said me or I a lot instead of we or us. And then I track this. I actually have it count the number, and then I basically store that in an Excel, and then I just look at that periodically. And then basically I want to see that reduce over time. So this is an example of something that I wanted to work on, inclusive language for myself. It's something that I use Copilot for. So again, really powerful tools that we can use to help us improve how we work. Now, these aren't limited to these types of scenarios. There's so much more we can do. And I'm particularly choosing an old, this is a very old visual of Copilot from the beginning era when we used it, where you could do things like figure out what happened yesterday with this account or what happened yesterday with this individual, like let's say a team member. And you could kind of get it to look at SharePoint signals and team signals, email signals and meetings and all that stuff and kind of summarize it for you. This is still valuable today. These scenarios are really powerful because before I have a one-on-one meeting, I do this all the time, where I really try and use AI to quickly help me understand what's been going on. But if you combine it with the other examples we gave, I can also have it do things like look for differences in perspectives, look for those other opportunities where I can take this discussion to the next level. And instead of us focusing time on, hey, what have you been up to and catching up on that, I get to instead focus on how can I help you? How can I help you do more of X? I think we're going to have more of Y coming down the pipe, a lot more. And I can see you've been working a little bit on that. How do I help you be more successful there? These changes in the way we talk with each other and collaborate and correspond are directly a result of using AI. And the more we use it, the more you'll find it doesn't just help you prepare and drive better collaboration events like this meeting example, but it actually helps you before, during, and after. And if you can learn how to do this, then the big trick is teaching others to do it as well. All right, so I'll pause there, and it looks like no questions yet, so I'll keep going. But next one, we'll talk about using AI to improve as
Yeah.
teams. Okay.
People are just asking, would you be able to share this presentation slides with me afterwards, Richard?
Oh, of course.
And I'll put them in the recording. As a lot of people are asking for it, if they can get it.
Absolutely. And I have a number of hidden slides with more prompt examples because I know that's what a lot of people are looking for. So feel free to reach out, and I'll send all that, and then we'll also send it for ESPC to share.
Perfect. Thank you, Richard.
Oh, no, thank you. All right. So let me just do one more drink. Sorry, guys. All right. So using AI to improve teams. So in the previous examples, we talked about you as a leader. How do you use AI? How do you make it help you be more effective in your work? Now I want to talk a little bit more about using AI across your team. And it turns out that a lot of this is going to be a bit of a feature-rich discussion because I really think this is one of those things that's greatly resolved by some simple innovations from Microsoft. So I'm going to walk through a few of them, but keep in mind that your goal isn't to just stop as a leader and how you use it. The goal is to figure out how to use it across your teams, because as we illustrated at the very beginning of the discussion, that's where the strongest ROI is. All right. So one way we can use it is facilitator experiences. So if you're in a meeting and you can have AI as an active participant, so this isn't just your AI, this is about AI as a team. So in our previous example is 1 times AI plus 1 times AI, equals, a multiplicative effect. In this example, you would take that whole thing and you put an AI times around it. And that makes sense because these can actually do things like take notes, figure out action items, help people stay on track, like what is the nature of our discussion. Lots of really powerful reasons to use this tool. So this is a really simple example. Another one that I really, really love is using the Copilot Pages experiences. So if you haven't been using Copilot Pages, you're not alone, but I will tell you this is one of those things that you really need to embrace, especially as a leader. So Copilot Pages are a way in which you can take your Copilot prompts, your responses from those prompts, and then put them in an intermediary, a place where we can kind of keep working on those results from those prompts. And in this way, you can actually do a prompt after prompt after prompt and really build out sort of a working document before you turn it into like a Word document, as an example. In this example, we have this strategy outline. And in the strategy outline, we've generated it with Copilot. And then what we've done is we've invited some other people in our team to collaborate on this this set of results. In this example, we can see that there was a section that was added by this user, add a section that talks about marketing tactics we should consider in Q1 based on industry best practices for streetwear. And that's what it did. Next, another person says, I want to put this into a table. And so then it converts it into a table. What's important about this really simple change is that because we're working in Copilot Pages with this experience allows us to see how each other are prompting, how you're prompting, how I'm prompting, and how that changes things over time. This idea of like version history, but with prompt fidelity, is really, really powerful and is one of the best ways to learn. When you think about learning AI, a lot of times we think of, oh, you're using it for email? That's really cool. Let me share that with me. Oh, you're using it over here to create PowerPoint presentations. Interesting. Let me try that. And that's great. But when you actually are collaborating with one another, you literally will see others use it and the process, the 10 prompts they went through before they got that final result. And you'll see the quality level improve each time, where at first it didn't give them the content they wanted. And then they had to refactor it. Then they had to ground it on 2 other data sets that made it better and more valuable. Then they corrected it because there was a couple things where it hallucinated, ungrounded, right? It had the wrong data. And so you can kind of see the sequencing of these actions. And because you see that full sequencing, it gives you as a collaborator more confidence in trying these things yourself. And of course, it actually allows others to learn faster from one another. So this is one of the best techniques for both improving how you prompt with each other and the quality of your learning cycle around AI. Here's another.
Richard,
Yep.
there's a few questions in. Um, I'll just do two at the moment, so that's okay. Can it be that the prompt is not available for all at the moment? I don't
Yeah.
see it in my Copilot.
Yeah, scheduling prompts is still not available, which is really frustrating. Sorry, I left it in there. I probably should have changed the slides. It was, as of last year, it was supposed to be in October, and it was in the roadmap. And the best answer I have publicly for this is that there's this thing called Copilot Actions, which I'm going to talk about in a second. Copilot Actions is really, really great. It's like a better version of scheduling prompts, and it's highly likely that the rollout of Copilot Actions, which is in preview still, is going to correlate and correspond to automating your prompts. So hopefully scheduling is soon-ish, and it'll be based on around the timing. So if I was to watch for something, I'd watch for Copilot Actions rollout, and I would look for the timing to be similar between the two of them. And sorry for that confusion in my slides there.
Perfect. We'll just do one more question now, if that's okay.
Yeah, please.
So typically, what are the KPIs which we can measure to check for AI adoption success?
Yeah, so you can look at it qualitative things like, how much value do people feel like they're getting out of it? You can do sort of baselines. So you could say like, this is how long this process took before. When people use AI in the sequencing, how long does it take after? Is there a notable improvement in quality? But your eventual goal is to move from productivity to quality measures, and then from quality measures into like traditional process measures like efficacy, growth, less cost measures, but more about like innovation, new revenue, things like that. So if you think about the adoption metrics, you could look at things like in a usage. You could look at the Viva Copilot Analytics experiences and kind of understand like how were they working before, how are they working after. Some of these things that we're talking about for team leadership are actually represented a little bit more cleanly in some of the Viva Insights data around meetings and meeting leadership. There's other Viva Insights data that's not as integrated with Copilot Analytics that's also extremely relevant. And since you own Viva Insights, if you own Copilot licensing, all those users can have that extra capability set. So one of the ones we look at is network effect, the strength of network ties and the relations between people. We look at some other things like manager 101 and effectiveness of manager. It's called manager effectiveness reports, and you can overlay those. So there's some other ones that you should do in addition to the Copilot Analytics, Copilot dashboard experiences for reporting. And then outside of all of those things, the best thing to do is create your own custom calculator, and it doesn't need to be really fancy. That's just going to take Microsoft's baseline numbers and then use your own variations of those calculations, because Microsoft is very optimistic in terms of the time savings that you get back from usage of AI. And we've all been there when you argue for 70 minutes with AI to get 7 minutes of productivity. There's definitely better ways to measure some of that stuff. And again, this goes down to the way you survey teams. This goes down to the way that you track the efficacy of usage. And then you put that into like fancy Excel basically and do some calculations based on that. So I have other material maybe I'll include as a follow-up that better identifies and breaks down some of those ROI adoption considerations, but those are some of the high-level considerations. All right, excellent. Well, so we've talked about this example of using Copilot pages to help share with one another and learn how each other are prompting. Of course, another version of this is the Copilot Gallery. So the Copilot Gallery has this ability where essentially, and again, this is rolling out, so you may not have this yet, but it's important so you're not creating redundancy by creating your own version of this. So you can take a prompt in Copilot Gallery today and you can message a person with it, right? So I can say like Anton here could message Wanda and say, hey, Wanda, I think this is a really useful prompt. It helped me. Maybe you should try it yourself. Well, the thing is, when you use these prompts, so in this example, I click that button to try this prompt, and then it uses it, immediately gives me my results. I could then bookmark this. I could then share this. Again, this is the scheduling capability. And so what I do is I take this prompt, and then because I can save it, that allows me to look at my own prompt history. And now as a leader, this is something that I use a lot. I have a lot of prompts as a leader that I've worked on myself. But as a team, there's also a lot of value here. And so team prompts are this ability where as a team, I can share this across my team. And this means that these aren't prompts that might matter for everyone in the org, but people in my team, they're probably going to get a lot of value out of these prompts. Some of the prompts that I might share to my team are from Microsoft. So this might have been, one of the suggested prompts from Microsoft based on their research and their work. Whereas other prompts might have been from different team members or might have been my own prompts that I think would be helpful for the team. So this is another thing to consider is not just are we can learn from each other with things like Copilot pages and just sharing with one another. Again, this high velocity collaboration is going to naturally happen if you have whole teams licensed and allocated to Copilot at the same time. They're going to naturally want to share this stuff, so that's great. But then what we can do is we can help people start to codify to store these prompts and then share them across their team. And again, any prompt to share to a team can be done as well quite easily. So lots of really powerful things in the Copilot gallery, as an example, if you haven't played with it, that both some of them have shipped now, some of them are coming, that really make this process easier as a team leader. And again, why am I highlighting this? Because as a team leader, overwhelmingly, team leaders are the ones who are encouraging AI usage. They're the ones everyone's going to and looking to. So if we can be proactive in helping people with this, it tends to go a long way in helping us become a more powerful AI leader. Here's another example. So these are Copilot actions, and I think Copilot actions are like amazing. I think this is a really, really fun preview program. I cannot wait. I understand why there's delays, but I really hope this rolls out soon for all of you, because once you get used to it, you're like, how did we ever do this individually as prompts before? It's just so powerful. So the idea behind it is we take these fill in the blank style prompts, and then we use them to help us stitch together like a lowercase p process to help us improve. So if you think about something that has shipped, when you create a Copilot SharePoint page, when you use Copilot to create a SharePoint page, it actually has like a Mad Lib style fill the blanks. And then when you fill the blanks, it generates this nice page, at least a first draft of the page. It's similar as a concept, and why this is valuable is the more we can move away from totally open prompts, the easier it is for people to access. But it's also more important because it actually structures a few things for you in one glance. In this example, it's like, what am I trying to summarize? What am I summarizing against? What was the duration? And then how do I want to be notified? And do I want this to repeat as an example and recur? So essentially, each time you do a prompt, especially if it's not beginning of the day or end of the day, you take this cognitive overload and cognitive overhead as you have to like shift your context from whatever you were working on to go to AI. Even though they make it kind of easy now, you have to click that Copilot button, pull it up, and then you just need to start exploring with Copilot. And so that takes work. It takes mental effort. And the idea here is, what if we could take those things that we do all the time, like where we're doing it more than once, and we could say, how about we automate that so it becomes a Copilot action? So we use pre-built templates. These are passive behaviors, so it just kind of works on our behalf. And it's an end-to-end process. So it's not just like us doing one prompt, then another, then another, then another, because that's what we often do, right? Multiple stages of prompts. Instead, what we can do is we can sequence them so the prompts happen automatically for me. In my previous example, I wanted to look at meetings and say, what was the EQ improvements? Well, if I took that and I wanted to do that across all meetings, and I wanted constantly new ideas of new sticky notes to put on my monitor in my example earlier, I could do that. But wouldn't it be great if instead of that, I could always have it actually give me those quick guidance scenarios when it's a problem, when it's impactful, et cetera. So doing that multiple steps of automation can make a big difference here. Now, there's a bunch of examples that Microsoft has publicly shared, so I can at least click through these for you. So regularly summarizing communications. This can be really powerful, like across customers. So like I want to know all the customers who are talking about Copilot, period. I'd love to know what's been going on there. That's the thing I do right now. You could gather, so you could say things like, I really want feedback from the team by this date, and then they could give that feedback, and then AI will not just request that feedback, but then it'll consolidate it and summarize it for me. You could do things like create new content from existing content, so think of like multiple formats and mediums. You could do things like um, review team messages where I've mentioned. So if you've ever been in a situation like I am where I'm way too many app mentions across many of my team's environments, often I actually find this is really helpful to figure out like what to prioritize and what to dig into, and so on and so forth. You can kind of get more and more of these ideas. So let's take an example like gathering. Let's say I want to do a newsletter, and I want to, again, as a leader, a thing I'm not doing today is we don't do a newsletter. And I'd really like our team to have some sort of like semi-newsletter each week or month. So what I'm going to do that is I'm going to message these people on Teams. This is important because my team doesn't work in email. They like Teams. So I'm going to message them on Teams, and I'm going to ask them for updates for the weekly newsletter. They're going to provide those by this date. And when they provide that information to me, then I'm going to have AI take that information and I'm going to have it draft that first version of the newsletter. Now, I'm still going to have to do work. I'm still going to have to clean it up. I'm going to have to add to it. But you can see where a thing I wasn't doing before, which was newsletters, now I can potentially do as a leader. And why is that beneficial? Because it allows me to celebrate these same people, the work they've been doing. It allows me to provide updates across other teams to understand what we've been up to, and so on and so forth. So in this example, whether it's monthly, weekly newsletter, you can actually structure the execution of this with a Copilot action. And so this is like individual messages. AI is going to write more effective versions of the messages. Then it's going to collect the responses, and then I can again use Copilot or AI to aggregate that, maybe put it into, I don't know, a SharePoint page or something. Lots of different ways you could use this over time. So actions are really powerful because in the near future, when they're not in preview anymore, we will all see how they can be used as a team leader. And I've seen time and time again in the preview where it's the team leaders that are coming up with the best actions, and then the teams are using their actions, these really clever ones that team leaders have identified and created. Another example that's public and already released right now, this is just like a quick summary of what we just talked about. Another example of something that has been released already is the project manager agent. So this capability allows you to essentially draft project plans with an agent. So it'll essentially look across your assets, your information in your organization, and then generate a project plan. It allows you to create tasks and then take the tasks and assign them to Copilot, the Copilot project manager agent. And the Copilot project manager agent will actually go and conduct the first version of that task. So let's say the task is to generate some copy and some research. It would then go perform that. If you haven't seen the new updates on the researcher agent or the analyst agent, you can start to see how these agents can kind of work with one another in the near future. So these are some other examples of ways you could use these agent experiences, like the project management agent here, where again, the AI is itself performing some of these tasks, and then you app mention it, you comment on it like, oh, this is great, but maybe you could do another version of this and change it this way and get more and more used to when and how to use AI versus when you want to use, to do the work yourself. What level of first drafting can we get done with AI support? How can it look at things like the implications of change if something is delayed? What are the knock-on effects here? How does that affect other tasks within this, Gantt or allocation? So there's things like that that it can really help with. Or if you prefer even more accessible, as Copilot agents in SharePoint. So every SharePoint site has these agents. Everyone can use these today, and they essentially allow us to see knowledge management as an agent, find content, and make sense of it. So in this case, I've got these product specification documents. I can create an agent that looks at these particular specification documents in a folder. And then by creating this agent, I can then use that to save time for my team. So we build a lot of product specs, we answer questions around them. I might not even release this to the broader org. I might just use it for my own team. But now if people have questions about product specs, I can actually ask those questions in my team, get the answers at a glance, and then be able to provide that information out to somebody else. The idea, again, is at the team level is where these agents are being built. And this example that we went through here is really only 2 clicks. It's, select a subset of files, and say create an agent. And then the agent makes sense because our team works on those files. We know what they are. And really, at a certain point in time, after we've used this for a while, we may find that it answers all our questions, and we want to publish this to other people. So we take that and we publish it to the broader organization as an agent, and now people can ask those questions, and we don't need to be asked and interrupted all the time. But when they can't get the answer to a question, they can ask us. But more importantly, as a team, we can look at how this agent is used when people aren't successful, when they drop off, things like that, and we can use that to improve our own way we work within product specifications in this example. So those are some other examples of using agents in SharePoint agents in Teams, and then app mentioning and having those discussions. But these are all examples of taking usage of AI as a team leader and really scaling it across your teams. All right, so let's kind of summarize. I had one more example here, but I didn't quite get to it. This is about RPA and how you could actually use desktop flow and automation to automate a process as a team leader, to get data from one thing to another. But it's okay, you guys get the idea. There's lots to do here. All right, so today we use AI in a number of different ways. And our goal over time is to find ways to use AI, not just to improve how we work as a leader, but to improve how our teams work. And I hope today I've been able to share a few examples and ideas that get you thinking about how you might use this more effectively as a leader. And I really appreciate your time and attention. I'll stay on for a few other questions that might come up in the sidebar here. And yeah, thank you again.
Amazing. Thank you, Richard, for a great presentation. So we'll get into questions and answers part. So there's another question there is, where does the list of prompts show up in Copilot pages?
So in Copilot pages, list of prompts. So each of the experiences in Copilot pages, when you load up like a prompt today, let me kind of see if I can do a live demo. Oh, let's see. Nope. All right, this might take me longer than I was hoping. One sec. If I can't get this quickly, I'll just answer it directly. Okay, that's not working. All right, that's okay. So essentially in the Copilot pages experience, you generate the page from any Copilot conversation thread or chat. And then when you share the page with other people, the experience over time will improve, where you'll see this fidelity of experience, where you can kind of see how people have added to or improved the Copilot page over time. That experience of showing how people have improved it over time will show this sort of version history-like experience that gives you that level of fidelity to understand, like, what did someone prompt and why did they prompt it, and then what was the sequencing of that. And the reason they do it is because they also want it for like undo, like to help with collaboration with one another and things like that. So so that's why and how that particular experience works. The Copilot pages data stores in the user location right now, and this is another thing that how do I put it? There's an announcement later this month that you'll see some interesting stuff about Copilot's future, and Pages is at the core of it, and you'll see some improvements on how we think about some of these experiences. I'll say that without getting into more trouble, but for now, use this as a reference point. Awesome. Hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, you said thank you. And the other one question is, how do Copilot pages fit in with SharePoint pages from an information management perspective?
Yeah. So Copilot pages are like loop pages, and they're stored. User. Sorry, I'm trying to remember the name of the. I was doing pretty good with my fever up until now, but so inside of the Copilot pages experience, it stores in this thing called loop workspace storage, I believe. And I'm just confirming, yes. So it's still public. All right, so I'm gonna pull this across, and basically the content for Copilot pages is stored in SharePoint Embedded for the user. And then basically, depending on where you're doing it, so like let's say you're you're working on a conversation where you copy and paste some of the content from a Copilot page, then it can change, right? If you're using other forms of pages. But today, the experience that I was showing there is around the loop workspace within SharePoint embedded within the user, if that makes sense. So that's the quick answer to that. And then, you know, a little bit more detail for that. I can like send a follow-up, but basically each user has a storage quota, and then they there is a big question of like, what do you do when a user leaves an organization? Because obviously Copilot pages are becoming like our first party citizen for interactive content before it gets finalized in, say, a Word document or something like that. So, you know, think of like research. When you use the researcher agent, you're creating Copilot pages almost always as their starting point. And the researcher results in Copilot pages is really helpful. Like it's a useful artifact. So if you don't store that somewhere else and a user leaves, like what happens? Like kind of like with OneDrive gets disposed of. So there are definitely some considerations for governance that you should consider here. But for simplicity, I would say like just understand how this SharePoint embedded storage works for Copilot pages, and then you don't really need to govern that much beyond how do I deal with disposition when people leave the organization. I'd say that's the only major thing that you need to tackle right now, and that's really, really relevant when you're using the research agents. If you haven't rolled out research agents, to be honest, the work in progress value of pages is diminished in terms of total, you know, IP value of an org. But I promise once you start to use the researcher agents, you're going to find those work in progress pages are actually very helpful, and you're going to want to keep them even if someone leaves. So that's the quick food for thought on that one.
Perfect. I think that's all the questions. So on behalf of the ESPC community, we'd like to extend a big thank you to you again, Richard, for taking out the time out today to carry this webinar. Really appreciate it.
Anytime.
So that's the end of today's webinar. You can find this webinar and more at sharepointeurope.com/resource center. Thanks again for all of you for joining us today. I hope you join us again soon. Take care.